guys, it's Jasma, and today to kickstart the seasonal cooking of the year, I'm going to share with you some amazing browned butter pumpkin scones. These are going to fill your house with a combination of scents no candle can ever match, and it truly just makes it officially feel like fall. I talked about how much I like putting browned butter in my baked goods in my Madeleine video and just never shared another recipe that involves this special ingredient, so I thought this was the perfect occasion to bring it back. So let's get started. First, let's make the browned butter. Make sure you do this step a little bit ahead of time because it is going to take a while for the butter to become solidified and cold again after we melt it down, and you don't want to rush that process. So in a small saucepan, I'm going to add in my unsalted butter. You need a little bit more than you actually need in the recipe because while the butter is browning, a lot of the liquid is going to evaporate, so you will lose a little bit of mass. The butter cooks quickly and will burn easily, so make sure you stir this entire time and take it off the heat immediately after it's ready. Let this cool down a little bit, and then I'm going to measure out how much we have. Half a cup of butter weighs 115 grams, so add more if you need to fulfill that amount. I'm lining a bowl with some plastic wrap, and this is just going to make it easier to remove the butter once it's solid. Make sure that your butter is no longer hot, then pour it into the prepared bowl, cover with plastic wrap, and place it into the freezer to chill. I have the butter in the freezer for it to become fully solid. The time that it takes will vary depending on how big your bowl is, so the more spread out the butter is and the thinner that it is, the less time it'll take, but usually for me it takes 10 to 15 minutes or so. Now we're going to move on to working on the wet ingredients. I have a nice and big bowl here, and to it I'm going to add everything that I have here. You want all of your ingredients to be really cold. This is going to help the flakiness of your final product. So I'm going to crack in my egg. Then add in the cold pumpkin puree, which I made myself, but you can also use canned if you'd like. Add in the milk and vanilla extract, then just whisk everything together until smooth. Cover with plastic wrap and place into the fridge to keep it cold. On to the dry ingredients. Since I'm making my scones inside of a food processor today, this is where I'm going to add all of my ingredients to mix them together, but if you don't have one, just replace this with a regular bowl. So add in your all-purpose flour, cornstarch, and I took the time today to show you guys how I level out my dry ingredients, baking powder, pumpkin spice or whatever combination of spices you'd like, salt, and some lightly packed brown sugar. Then just blend everything together until combined. The butter has been in the fridge for 20 minutes, so it's completely solid. We can finally add it into the rest of the mix. If you line the bowl properly, you'll very easily be able to take it out. Then cut the butter into small cubes while avoiding contact with your fingers so that you don't melt it down. And then we're going to add this into the food processor. Cut the butter into the dry ingredients, and having a food processor makes this so much easier because it blends everything much more evenly. However, if you don't have a food processor, I have videos in the past where I've done this by hand, so go check those out. Blend this mixture until it forms a crumbly sand-like texture, but it's okay if there are still small bits of butter in here. Now we can combine the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients to form a dough. So I just took this out of the fridge. Once again, you want it to be really cold. Then simply add one to the other. And do yourself a favor and just breathe this in beforehand because it smells amazing. Gently fold this together with a spatula until it forms a dough. It is going to look a little bit dry and crumbly at first, but if you just keep mixing it, it actually forms a pretty sticky dough. You don't want to overwork this, so as soon as there are no more dry bits, stop mixing it because we want to keep those little bits of butter intact and not have it combined with the rest of the mixture. Transfer the dough onto a sheet of plastic wrap, tightly seal, and then place into the fridge for about 30 minutes or even longer so that it can become nice and firm, and this is going to make it easier to work with. I'm back with my dough. It is now very, very cold and quite firm. So I have a cutting board and I'm just going to lightly dust it so our dough doesn't stick. You want to start preheating your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius while we begin cutting out the scones. The dough should be pretty easy to work with, so I'm just going to use my hands to flatten it out until it's about an inch thick. You can use a rolling pin if you'd like, but I find that usually when I do that, I kind of roll it out a little too much. So this is just how I like to restrain myself. Dip the cookie cutter in some all-purpose flour so that it doesn't stick to anything, and then cut out your dough. Then place it onto a baking tray lined with some parchment paper and leave a little bit of space between each one. When working with the scraps of dough, try kneading it as little as possible and put it back in the fridge if it has become too soft. I quickly made some egg wash. You just mix together the egg and the milk. Then lightly brush over the top of your scones to give it a nice color and a little bit of a shine once it's completed baking. Then place into your preheated oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 11 to 12 minutes until the top is nice and golden brown. The bake time will vary depending on the size of your scones. While the scones are baking, I'm going to quickly make a maple spiced glaze. You don't have to do this step if you do not want to. They're perfectly good to enjoy on their own, but I think adding a little extra bit of sweetness and also a little decor makes the scones more interesting. So to the icing sugar, add in some pumpkin spice and maple syrup, then just mix until completely smooth and there are no lumps. This should be pretty thick, but you can adjust the consistency by adding more or less of the maple syrup and icing sugar. My scones have finished baking. They should look really puffy and flaky, and you don't need to wait for this to become completely cooled before drizzling on the glaze, so I just used my spoon to zigzag it over my scones. That's it with this video. I really hope that you enjoyed this recipe and that you could try it out. If you are to store these scones inside of the fridge, I would recommend you to let it come to room temperature or maybe microwave for 10 to 15 seconds before eating it so that it can become soft and flaky again. I like to eat these scones with jam, but of course pair it with whatever condiments you'd like, maybe even pour yourself a cup of tea. I have plenty of more seasonal recipes planned for you guys, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching this video, and see you guys next time. Bye! I hope you guys are excited. I hope you're excited for this year's. I have some more pumpkin recipes and fall I have some fall recipe. Oh Jesus. Just restart it. Let me think about that. I guess that.